okay? And I can see the dot now that you guys have all pointed it out to me, okay? So let's go back and bring this up. And we'll bring this up because I'll be needing that after a while. Okay, so yeah, does anybody know what happened to Yao or Timothy? David, he should show up pretty soon, I think. Does anybody know Yao or Timothy? Okay, all right, I'm gonna have to check on them. All right, so tonight we're switching from RTCMix, and we're gonna be talking about AI stuff because I think that's an advanced topic that's probably wanting to be talked about, all right? And I honestly don't know, usually my teaching style is to show you code and how to do stuff and everything like that because I'm from the Midwest and we do that thing. But tonight's going to be more of a lecture than that, kind of like what I do with music humanities, or used to do. And I thought what might be interesting is to give you a bit of a background and a framework for understanding how some of the AI algorithms work now. I'm going to give you kind of like my history of AI, because I was actually a part of that history, 30, 40 years ago. So yeah, so it's going to be more of a lecture-y kind of thing. All right? And it's interesting because it's also the story of a battle between two different approaches to AI. One is, when computers first became computer-like, back in the 1950s, they immediately began to think of like, well, we can create an electronic brain. We can create something that's going to, be able to be intelligent and help us and do all these wonderful things. There's David. How are you? You already know all this anyhow, David, so but I am recording it. So immediately they began to imagine how can we create an artificial intelligence. And of course, this is the era, you all heard about the Turing test, right? Okay, they even made movies about it and everything like that. Where if the computer can like fake you out into thinking you don't know if it's a human or a computer, then it's passed the Turing test. Sidestepping a lot of the issues that philosophers had been, debating for literally centuries, millennia, about consciousness and agency and, personhood and things like that. So, and again, these are technicians, so they didn't even mess with that either. But the two different approaches that they tried to take is one was, which was kind of an apparent one, was why don't we try to simulate how a brain works in a computer? And that doesn't seem that far-fetched because at this time there was a lot of neurological research that was hitting the world where they discovered that neurons are actually kind of binary devices. Now, that's not actually true, but it kind of is. My son would be beating me on the head right now. He's getting his doctorate in neuroscience. And he'd go, no, Dad, that's wrong. But the idea is neurons have this thing called the action potential, and if enough neurotransmitters hit a neuron, it will fire. And basically, electricity will travel along this dendrite axon, that they call it, to the dendrites, releasing more neurotransmitters, causing the next neuron in the chain to either fire. It's either an on or an off kind of thing, okay? And in fact, that's what EEGs look at. They look at the electrical activity in your brain because you do generate a lot of electricity. And sometime, maybe for fun, I'll show you the brainwave project that I do with my friend Dave Sulzer, where we sonify your EEG signals. It's not as exciting as it might sound. It's kind of fun to do, but you can't like think of Mozart and out comes Mozart, which is a question we get when we present this a lot. But what it is it's just like a noise generator because you have so many neurons and so many things are going on in your head. So that was the first idea, was to try that. The second idea was, no, we want to create computers who already have a sense of what things are. And that's what they called symbolic AI. And that's where you have very high-level concepts that you code into what they used to call expert systems and things like that. Okay? And the first kind of foray into this was made by a guy named Joseph Weizenbaum. I can't remember if he was the one that invented it or not. No, he did ELIZA. Yeah, I can't remember who did this, but oh no, I do. Yeah, it was Frank Rosenblatt. I have it written down here. Yeah, and he came up with a thing, an architecture called the perceptron, and it basically looked like this. this is what we would now call a really crude neural net. And essentially, the perceptron had two input nodes and then an output node. And you set up this very simple math so that each one of these had a value and it had a weight along these sort of what we call graph points, edges or something like that. And if the combined signal from the value times the weighting exceeded a certain amount, then this guy would light up and say, whoa, I changed from a 0 to a 1. And the idea was that you could make a whole network of these and theoretically simulate the brain. So now, unfortunately, this is kind of like true, like all through AI, is that you tended to make grandiose claims for things that weren't quite grandiose yet. So Rosenblatt started giving interviews about how within 10 years we will have a fully intelligent computer that will be able to do anything that we ask it to. And in fact, within 20 years, it'll be smarter than we are, based on this perceptron thing. Well, that didn't quite work out the way he wanted it to. And in fact, two guys initially who were into these perceptrons discovered something. The two guys were a guy named Seymour Papert and a guy named Marvin Minsky. And they're both pretty famous. Minsky especially. Minsky was the founder of the Media Lab at MIT. They're both professors at MIT. Papert, he went on to create a lot of learning technologies, and he was kind of considered the father of the laptop, I think. Or maybe that's somebody else. But they were big fans of this perceptron until they discovered they could prove mathematically that there were certain operations, logical operations, that this could not do. And one of them was what we call an exclusive OR, which means that either this one is fired or that one is fired. And no matter how you constructed these perceptrons, you couldn't disambiguate which one had fired. And that's kind of important if you're looking, if this is your data from the real world, and this is the fire alarm went off, and this is your coffee is ready, you kind of want to know which one has fired. So as a result, perceptrons and the whole idea of neural nets just basically pretty much vanished from the field. And we entered the era of symbolic computing, where the computer was embedded with knowledge already. And one of the first examples of that I can actually show you is this was the one that was created at MIT by Joseph Weizenbaum. We're now in like the mid-60s. This was like late 50s, early 60s, okay? This guy named Joseph Weizenbaum, I've been mispronouncing it. He created a program that he called ELIZA. And ELIZA was the first natural language interpreter. And I found a version of it that's actually online. And what was weird is that he set it up like, does it say what it is down here? A psychotherapist, using this particular thing where they ask you things like that, okay? So please tell me what's been bothering you, okay? And I might write something like, I hate cabbages. You say you hate cabbages. Yes, I do. I hate them with a passion. That's quite interesting. So you think? So, A, what are your feelings now? Mellowness. Too bad, bozo. Okay, so you see how it works, right? It's just kind of weirdly generating these responses and, just kind of coming through with stuff. Well, again, people are looking at this going, oh my God, the computer can talk. Now, what's really strange is that apparently this became kind of like a cult underground thing, and they discovered that there were people that were actually using this kind of as their psychotherapist. And they kind of added some extensions to it, putting in some keyword recognition and things like that. But the idea is that this was not generated by a network or anything like that. This was generated by a computer program that basically had these things sort of preloaded. Now I was going to show you another thing, but unfortunately it's using Java in a browser that doesn't work very well. I wrote a program back in the mid-1990s called Bush-O-Matic. that would generate George W. Bush speeches. I'm not going to do a Trump-o-matic. But basically it's like, let them roll, and a bunch of like sort of things like that. So anyhow, maybe I'll try and resurrect it someday for historical purposes, okay? But this was the beginning of the reign of symbolic computing. And one of the big sort of things that introduced this to the world, how many of you heard of a book called Gödel, Escher, Bach? Okay, some have, some haven't. Yeah, it's still kind of around. That was written by a lowly assistant professor at Indiana University. I actually knew him, a guy named Douglas Hofstadter. And he wrote this book that then went on to win the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award. And it was about symbolic computing and how you could get a computer to think using what he called strange loops and things like that, where these symbols that the computer knew about ahead of time could crash into each other and generate, new forms of knowledge for the computer. And I have an example now of something where they took this symbolic approach and applied it to music generation. And this is interesting because it has a very unique aspect to it. This was a guy back in the late 1980s. One of your fellow Turks, Kemal Ebçoglu, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Yeah. He worked at the IBM Watson Research Center up in White Plains and generated a program that would take a simple melody and create a 4-part Bach chorale out of it. Now, if those of you who know 4-part Bach chorales, they're using these rules of counterpoint that are very dense and difficult to actually do, even though they seem very simple. So I'm going to play you this video. It's about 2 minutes long, and again, there's a surprise in it too, okay? So here we go. We need to turn this up, I think. Or, boy, that's fine. Yeah, that seemed very quiet for some reason. I want to make sure I'm going to the right place. Yes, I am. Okay, ready? Here we go.
4-part harmony. It's a magical blend of voices into a rich texture. And it almost takes a magician to create them. In his entire lifetime, Johann Sebastian Bach created less than 400 choral harmonies.
That's Kemal there. This is a tape made by IBM.
Well, today, music composition students at Columbia University are studying the intricacies of Bach's melodic magic. But now, budding Bachs will have an advantage never dreamed of in the days of the composer, trading long hours at one keyboard for a few at another. It's a computer program developed by Kemal Ebçoglu at the Thomas J. Watson Research Center outside New York City. Using his knowledge of music and mainframes, he produced the program, which can perform the 23 billion computations necessary to harmonize a Bach chorale in just half an hour.
The program takes as input the soprano melody, the chorale melody, and adds the alto, tenor, and bass parts to the melody. And it prints the result in conventional music notation.
It's not all just high-tech do-re-mi, but a way for today's composers to see how far they can go.
It gives us insight into some of the rules that Bach was using when he was composing. Now, as far as future possibilities go for composers working today, they now have access to these rules, and they can go beyond that and sort of define their own rules and define their own music out of these rules.
So add a fourth beat to the conventional 3, Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, and now bites.
We need to set up all those sine tone generators again.
Okay. Okay, so here's a surprise. How many recognized that character right there?
Oh my god.
That's me, age 30. What was weird is that I knew about this research, and so I thought, I wonder how much is online. So I Googled Kemal Ebçoglu Bach chorale, and I got this video, and I was watching it. I'd completely forgotten that I'd done that. I'm going, oh my God, who is that person? Yeah, that's how one of our studios used to look. We had 100 and some analog oscillators in the back. We were going to give them away as prizes for bad electroacoustic music. Anyhow, so Yeah, that's strange but true. Okay. So now, they don't have any good examples of this on here, but I have some other examples by another guy who became very well known for doing this symbolic approach to kind of figuring out how to do this stuff. Now, when I say symbolic approach, it had a knowledge base, I used to call them knowledge bases, of like different chord structures and probabilities of transitioning from one to another. Basically a big Markov chain type thing that we talked about earlier. And this one guy named David Cope kind of made a whole industry out of it. He was at Ohio State University in Ohio for a while, but then he moved out to the University of Santa Cruz, and he created this whole thing, published a book called Experiments in Musical Intelligence. And this is where you can hear some of the shortcomings of this. Like, I don't have good examples of Kemal's stuff, but basically it would start doing really fine, and then it would just go weirdly off the rails at some point. And that's the problem with doing, contrapuntal writing, is that you have to be very careful about how you construct these things. But here's a David Cope example, and this one is actually pretty good. This is his experiment in musical intelligence. He set it up with he seeded it with a bunch of fragments from Vivaldi, okay? And this is what it came up with. Sorry about the goofy graphics. So not bad, but Vivaldi was kind of like that, If you get a little bit further into it, I think this is the part. That's where it starts getting a little weird, like that. Okay. Now here's another one of David's. Okay, this is his Bach fugue writer. Okay, so here we go. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you can hear, but it's a little weird. I mean, even without the graphics. I forgot about the graphics were this bizarre. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Here, I mean, it's hard to even tell what. All right, you win. Well, again, you can kind of hear what's happening, and I want to explain it because I actually did a thing like this that you're going to hear in a second. Essentially, he went through like all of Bach's corpus and fragmented out, like I said, these kind of vertical slices of the pieces, okay? And like I said, that became the knowledge base. And then he had these transition probabilities of, if you have this slice, what's your chance of going to these other slices? How do I make decisions about what the next note is, and things like that. So now, this is at the time one of my colleagues here, a musicologist named Lehman Perkins, he passed away about 20 years ago, was the world's most famous scholar of Ockeghem, Johannes Ockeghem, the famous Renaissance composer. And he said, hey, I read about this guy, David Cope. And I'm going, oh no. He says, I'm thinking, why don't we try to model some Ockeghem? Because the name of the game in musicology is if you can take anonymous works and say, no, they were actually by Ockeghem. Or if you can take a work by Ockeghem and say, that wasn't by him. He says, why don't we take that and invert all the probabilities and see if certain pieces match the template or not? So I said, okay, I'll do that. I didn't have tenure yet, so I had to do everything. Okay, and came up with my model of Ockeghem, okay? And I'm going to play you some, all right? Yeah. Oh, shoot. It's not there. That's the one thing I forgot to do. Okay, let me find it. Hold on, gang. Okay, there we go. Okay, Renaissance. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So this is an example of my model of Ockeghem. We had some grad students helping to input the data and things like that, and it basically made sounds like this. Okay, I might have to turn this down a little bit. Didn't know how to end very well. But there's something really, really wrong with this. And this is the problem with that approach that all three of us were doing, Imchoglu, Cope, and I, is that it has no larger sense of shape or form. And what's happening here, especially, and let me play you the second one, is that it's like cadencing like every 4 bars. You know, that's not how Ockeghem sounded. Okay, here's another one. It's not too bad, actually. Okay, so Lehman listened to this and said, I'm afraid that's not going to work. And I said, oh, thank God, because I didn't want to code anymore. Because writing this amount of code was difficult. You know, in order to capture all this knowledge, you had to put in all these different entries and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of the big downfall of symbolic computing in general. There's this guy, I think he was at Stanford, named Douglas Lynott, who had this giant project to try and embed all common sense knowledge in sets of rules that the computer could then execute. And again, had to be coded by hand. So he had like a team of graduate students, you know, they're going, teapots are hot, you know, things like that. So it was like this weird kind of thing. It never really did. Another famous researcher at MIT named Terry Winograd created this blocks world where you could tell it, take the red block and put it on top of the blue block. And it was all this kind of virtual reality, early virtual reality, and it would go clonk, clonk. And that was a huge accomplishment, you know? I mean, so yeah, AI was not, all of a sudden it wasn't going to be within the next 10 years, maybe in the next 50 years we'll have a really intelligent computer, okay? All right, now, I want to show you one more sort of thing that, okay, let me see, is this back behind there? Nope. Let me get back to my Finder here. Okay. Yeah, that's where I want to go. I actually tried to do this, but this is starting to get back towards neural nets in a way. Make sure I'm doing okay on time. Yeah. My doctoral dissertation was actually a giant AI project. I did this down at Princeton, studying with Paul Lansky, among other people. And one of the things that I really missed, back then we had to enter all the data that you've seen in Maximus P. It wasn't in real time or anything. We had to enter them. We started with punch cards, but then we got terminals. Whoa, that was a big one. You had to type out, like, whenever you wanted to get reverb on something, you had to type out all the parameters and everything like that. And had to submit the job to the computer center. Then you had to go to the computer center, check out a tape, walk uphill in the snow both ways to this conversion place where we'd listen to this. I think I told you this story before, right? You guys heard all this? Okay, well, yeah. Well, basically, you'd get the computer and put it on the conversion apparatus, and your masterpiece would go because you mistyped a parameter. So it wasn't pleasant. What I really missed was, before I came back to do my graduate work, I'd been doing a lot of work in recording studios. And the collaboration was fun. Like my friend Dave Fulton, my producing partner would be next to me, and I'd go, Dave, let's get the funky bass sound we had the other day. And I didn't have to say, Dave, bass with a 100K boost at 5, 0.4 dB. I didn't have to do all these parameters. So I thought, hey, I know how to program computers. I'm going to program a computer that will understand what I say when I tell it, play the funky bass sound, okay? So the name of this thing, if you can see here, was Elthar. And that's because I read too much cheap, trashy science fiction. And my wife didn't let me name our firstborn male child Elthar the Stargazer. So I named my program Elthar. And what I did was, for my big dissertation piece, I did my version of the Four Seasons. I recorded a bunch of ambient sounds outside. Where we lived in New Jersey at the time had this giant woods in the background. It's over near the Assunpink Reservoir. And I recorded different times of the year. And so that was the source material for Elthar, and it knew how to do certain signal processing things. And this was different from, it was still symbolic, but it was different from the Cope and the Evcoglu approach, where what it did was to parse the sentence that it was looking at. It would look for specific keywords. And this is also a trick that a lot of people in AI used back then. And the keyword would have then certain operations associated with it that I could then do based on that keyword, and any modifiers that might happen in the sentence later on. Okay? So basically, I turned it loose. And the trick, and this is where we start getting back into the neural net thing, which I'll get to in a second, because there's still neural net activity going on, but it's a very low level at this point. Not low level in terms of programming, low level in not much going on. But after, I would say, take the recording from winter and add some echo to it. And it would, in the absence of any information, it would just make up some parameters. And then it would ask me, how did you like that? I go, I liked the regeneration factor, but the delay time was too long. So it would then say, Elthar understands. And it would change the probability of choosing those parameters at any given time. And this is kind of what it came up with stuff like this, okay? Now, I'll run it ahead a little bit. It never learned anything. It never learned how to fade in and fade out, for example. I don't know if you noticed that. I kept saying, here, try fading this in. Elthar understands. And it was really, really fun to do. But in order to get my degree, I had to create a piece of music with it. So I basically made a piece that was about 25 minutes of that. Okay? And played it in this concert, and it was just god awful. I was looking around to people in their seats, and they're just kind of going, And I said I'd never want to do this to an audience again. However, I did do one thing, a lesson that I learned from this, and this is a whole different tangent, so we're not going to go into it too much, but this is maybe one of the seeds of the sound art program, is that I had such fun doing it. And I knew the piece was awful. And I knew the piece wouldn't communicate that fun. So what I did was I set up at intermission, how many of you, especially from the United States, participated in things we called science fairs? Do you know what I'm talking about? This is something you did when you were in the 5th grade, where you would like take a piece of celery and put it in a thing and go, look, capillary action. And of course you'd misspell capillary because you're only in the 5th grade, you know. But we would do these presentations. So I set up a science fair of LTHAR. And I had like different booths where people could go and listen to different sounds that I tried to do, and it would talk about what LTHAR was trying to learn. And I had apple cider and ice cream, and people absolutely loved it. It was like the best presentation of this piece, you know. And I thought, wow, you don't have to play a piece in a concert hall for it to be really successful. And the last thing I did was LTHAR was very successful as far as I was concerned because it did get me my doctorate. I faked them out. And we had a party to celebrate it. And I took a bunch of the recordings of LTHAR and put them on like cassettes with portable, we used to call them boom boxes back then. And I put them all out in the woods with 2 minutes between sounds on each of the tapes. So you'd be sitting there having some nice beer or white wine going, hey, congratulations, Brad. And in the woods you'd hear, that was really cool too. I really like that. Anyhow, so that's that. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of my stuff, just as a way of showing how far you can go with this symbolic computing, and then get to a thing that's going to be kind of a pivot, and we're going to talk about what's been going on with neural nets during this period. I started fooling around with an algorithm that did a passive imitation of an electric guitar. It was done by a friend of mine at Princeton, undergraduate named Charles Sullivan. He's a professor at Dartmouth now. And he took what's called the Karplus strong algorithm. Remember those strum things that I always used when was doing the examples? Well, he took the strum instrument and added distortion and feedback to it. So it sounded like a really cheap Sears Silvertone guitar. These are the guitars that used to have the amplifier in the case. So it went, it was really great. But it was really hard to use because the parameters were highly nonlinear. So I said, well, I will write an artificial intelligence program that will know how to construct the parameters. And it was actually kind of successful, okay? This is an example of a piece that I did with it called Almost Real. No. Where is it? Riffs. Rough Raga Riffs, okay? And the conceit was, I'd been commuting up to New York from central New Jersey. And at the time I didn't have MP3 players or anything like that, so I listened to the radio. And at the time I was driving up, there were 2 radio stations that were right next to each other. One was WFDU, Fairleigh Dickinson University, and they were playing World Music Hour, which meant that they played Indian music, because that was the only world music there was back then, okay? I'm being sarcastic, okay? Right next to it on the dial was WSOU, South Orange University, all metal all the time. And I loved this stuff. I'd go to Fairleigh Dickinson, I'd hear Ravi Shankar going, I'd flip over to WSOU and hear Dave Mustaine going, Shankar, Megadeth, Shankar, And I said, wow, they're the same. What if I wrote a guitarist using my newfound programming artificial intelligence techniques that combine the two? And so what you're going to hear is there's a chintzy sort of tambura-like sound. That's the drone that you hear in Indian music. And then you're going to hear a heavy metal guitarist playing raga riffs. And the fun part about this is that, again, I embedded all of the rules myself in this. So I just basically said, play me something for 30 seconds. And this is the kind of stuff that it would generate. I love the feedback at the end.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
It reminds me of, like,
It's-
I was just gonna say, it reminds me of some Frippin' Eno stuff.
Very,
Right.
yeah. I listen to Frippin',
Yeah,
yeah.
it's so good.
Yeah. No pussyfooting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but the thing is, I didn't write any of this. I mean, seriously, it was one Lisp command that I executed. And after a while, I felt like a couple of things were weird. First of all, I became less of a composer and more of a film editor. Because I'd just have it generate this stuff, and I'd say, I like that one, put them together, and you get this piece going. So not too bad. And the other thing is it got kind of scary. And I felt like, actually I was kind of duplicating the studio again, where I felt like I had this guitarist where I once had, like, in the studio, you have a talkback microphone to the musicians, and you can, like, hit the button and say, hey, John, play that again, but really lean into that high note, you know? In this, my talkback microphone was a Lisp editor where I could say, def fun, lean into high note, and change the probabilities. And it was always amalgam of all this stuff, okay? So I thought that was pretty cool. And I thought, wow, what if I made a whole ensemble of this? And I'd been listening to a bunch of really cheesy Irish folk music at the time from a label called Green Linnet Records. And I thought, I'm going to make an Irish ensemble. It's going to have a bass, it's going to have a guitar, and it's going to have a mandolin. And I pretended like I was a producer, so you're going to hear some, like, weird guitar tricks and things like that. But listen especially to the mandolin. Okay, and this is called Almost Real. Clever name, right? Okay, but here's what it sounded like. Yeah, there's a couple of things. This is like early 90s, okay? So that gives you a little bit of context of what was going on here. None of this was done in real time. I wrote a Lisp object for Maximus P, and there was actually a demo that used the Rough Raga thing, but that relied on Java too, and it doesn't work anymore. Yeah.
So it slows down at the end.
Yeah.
Is this like another one-liner?
Yeah, that was me being producer and, like, saying, all right, at the end. It had a bit of knowledge. It had a harmonic template that it was using to go through to know how to construct the chords. Basically, this didn't have any of those predetermined slices like the David Cope or the Choglu had. What this did was, this is going through the parameters, and it was saying, all right, I need to decide the next pitch, you know, and then it would use that. I need to decide how much of a delay I'm going to put on this pitch, you know, how much am I going to detune it, you know. So basically, these are all parts of these rule sets that, again, they call them expert systems, that were hung off of the executing thing that was trying to make the next note. So I just inserted a rule that said slow down, and yeah, but I did that kind of when I wanted it to slow down. I mean, the piece has a whole bunch of different parts. There's another flat pick, like, country guitar part, you know, where it's featuring the guitar player. And in that one, there's one part where the bass players obviously had a bit too much to drink. Irish folk music. And it kind of messes up. Kind of goes like that. I thought, cool. But the scary thing is that the mandolinist never gets tired. I mean, he's like, you know, it's just like playing forever. And this is, remember I said got kind of scary? This one was beyond scary. This one was like, this kind of weirded me out. I'd been doing a lot of work in Greece at the time and setting up some studios. And usually afterwards we'd go out and we'd drink some ouzo and listen to these old Greek guys come down from the mountains and play. Do you know what a gaida is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bagpipe that's just an inflated sheep carcass, where they stick the chanters like where the sheep's paws are going to be, and then you blow into it, and the sheep goes, and then it goes like that. So we'd hear this incredible folk music, with these like amazing timings. Then we get in the car to drive back to the hotel. We turn on, we'd hear either Madonna or Michael Jackson. And I became really worried about musical diversity. And I thought with this project, basically I had created the McDonald's French fries of Irish folk music, where they're vaguely potato-like, but not really. I mean, I could play this for my mom and she'd go, "Oh, is that Irish music you like?" And I go, "No, Mom, it's my computer program." So I thought, I know how to program computers. I'm going to do something about this. And this is where it starts circling back into how a neural net operates. Because the trick is to get the computer to learn stuff or do stuff on its own. Like with this, I coded in those rules by hand. With the Elthar thing and with the other thing, I coded them in by hand. Elthar was a little bit weird because it had probabilities. But I thought, wow, I wonder if I can get a population of these instrument players to produce their own musical style. Now for this, I'm using the Karpov-Strong algorithm is an example of what we call a physical model, and I showed you that last time with RT-CMIX. There's actually a very good physical model that Perry Cook wrote of a flute, and it sounds pretty flute-like. So I thought, all right, I'm going to start out and I'm going to make a very basic set of rules for it. It's going to know how to do like single notes, and it's going to know how to do a certain inflection, I call them, where we'll do a little vibrato or a pitch bend or something like that. And I'm going to create 50 of these copies. So I have like 50 different flute players, okay? And they all have the same copy of the rules. And I sampled one of them, and this is what it would produce. Okay, just very short kind of, stuff like that. Now, here's the learning algorithm. The way it worked is, and again, I was thinking of it in evolutionary terms, cultural evolution, that one of each generation, one of the 50 would get hit by lightning or touched by God or whatever you want to have, and it would go in and modify its rules somehow, according to probabilities or things like that. Then, this is the fun part, the other 49 would vote and decide if it was cool or not. And if it was, they would then adopt that modified rule with a certain probability. So this would go on, and I did this for like 1,000 generations. And I sampled 2 of them, and they were doing stuff like this. Okay, and here's another one. So you hear, it does have a sense of style, Yeah, whatever. Okay.
Kurdish wedding.
Yeah. And
music.
I didn't code that in. They did this on their own. Okay. So I thought, oh my God, this is so cool. So I thought, I'm going to go for 10,000 generations now. We're going to get like this island is going to produce its own sophisticated music, and this is what happened. Okay. This is a sample of 2 of them after 10,000 generations. Why isn't that working? Oh, shoot. It's not pointing to the right one. Something happened.
So good.
Something happened. There's a volcano erupted or something. Some of them, all they did was go like this over and over again. So, yeah, I didn't. Well, this was the year that I went through my 10-year review. So I never did anything more with this project. The code is still out there, and someday maybe I'll kind of write it up. And the only place that this has ever been published was in a very obscure journal in Greek. I don't think you can find online anymore. But yeah, it was kind of a fun experiment. Now, so getting back to this idea of how neural networks work, there was something that was related to this that I thought about including in our classes about algorithmic composition called the genetic algorithm. And basically, it's a way of trying to do what I did, get music to evolve. But what you would do is you'd create an artificial sort of chromosome that had certain sort of things associated with it, and then you would mutate that, and that would then create. And then what you did was a lot of these, like this had what's called a fitness function, where the fitness function was if the others voted to decide if it was cool. On a genetic algorithm, you'd have a fitness function where maybe it would generate 6 versions of something, and you would choose 2 that you liked. So it's the same kind of thing I was trying to do with LTHAR. The problem with LTHAR is that it just didn't have enough data. It took me too long to do this. That was the thing that had to happen for neural nets to take sway. Now, we're going to get back to neural nets, okay? And yeah, the way there'd been basically after Minsky and Papert sort of had their thing. I mean, these people are rabid, you know, in the sciences, like there's like these knockdown, drag-out fights, and they just quashed every mention of anything smacking of neural network. They used to have to code word them. They called it connectionism and things like that, because otherwise they couldn't get anything published, no grants. You know, but there were still a few people that really believed that this could happen. One was a guy at University of Toronto named Geoffrey Hinton, and he's sort of like considered now the father of modern like artificial intelligent neural net technology, because he never gave it up. They would have these like secret sort of like conferences where they all get together and go, yeah, I got a neural net to do this. Isn't that cool? You know, and Geoffrey Hinton, yeah, he's now worth like hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, because he was able to like kind of ride the wave and basically showed that there's a lot of ways that you can construct a neural net to do something interesting. And I'm going to show you a few of them here. So the perceptron turns out was just one way of really thinking about how you can construct a network. Here's a bunch of examples of other ones. There's the perceptron, but you can do what's called a feed forward, and you can interconnect these nodes. And remember, each one is going to have a value, and then these are going to have multipliers. So when you compute this, you take that value, multiply it, put it there, multiply it, put it there, multiply that, put it back there, you know, multiply that and put it back there. So there's all these different architectures for designing what they call network topologies. Now, I'll be honest, there's kind of a dark art to this. It's not clear exactly how they work. I think there's probably a lot more research has been done, and they probably understand a lot more. David, do you know anything about network topologies or anything like that?
Network topology?
Yeah.
You mean neural network?
Yeah, yeah.
I think this is a really good like classification of all the
Yeah.
structures, but
Right.
it's a little bit too complicated for like newcomers for this topic.
Yeah. I'm just showing it off. Yeah. But there's a lot of different ways that you can set these things up that do different things. And one of the things that Hinton discovered is a way of what he called training the network called back propagation, where you give it an input, then you give it the output you'd like to see. And then what happens is the neural network goes in and basically assigns random numbers to all of these sort of like different nodes and things like that, okay? And then it computes the network and you get a value coming out. If the value is close to what you want, you retain all those. Otherwise, you discard it, and then you go again, and then instead of assigning random numbers, you assign a random amount of change, kind of like the Lorentz attractor that we did. So you're gradually shifting the values and the weights in the network, and you're trying to get it so that the output matches what you want the output to be, okay? And it works. This is basically, I'm calling it neural networks, but this is a special case of what we call machine learning. And that kind of predated our current obsession with networks, even though they all use machine learning. And just to show you how it works, I've written up a little sort of neural network thing. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? And what I did was I took basically 8 input nodes and I connected them to what we call the hidden layer, which are these 2 nodes here, like that. And then those 2 guys take their thing, and then you are looking for a particular target value coming out the bottom, okay? And again, just to reimburse, the way it works is I give it an input. Now what I'm doing is I'm imagining, what if this input was a very simple, fast Fourier transform? and this is like 100 hertz, 200 hertz, 300 hertz, 400 hertz, or whatever, okay? And I'm just going to give it that, and I want it to classify between high sounds, or stuff with energy on here, or low sounds, stuff with energy on here. The way I do that is I say, well, if it's a high sound, when it computes the network, I want it to hit a value of 1.0. If it's a low sound, I want it to hit a value of minus 1.0. So what it's going to do is, like I said, initially assign random values for all these multiplier weights, random values to those two. And I'm going to give it the input. And it's going to compute the network and say, well, it was supposed to be a high sound. Did it get closer to 1? Yes, it did. I'll keep those values. No, it didn't. Throw those values away and go again. All right? And the amazing thing is that this works. All right. So I'm going to come back here. And I'm going to fire this up. Now, I could have done this in RTC Mix, but for various reasons, I don't remember that. Okay, I wrote it in JavaScript, so you can actually see the code here if you want to. And part of it is because we have to use all these array indexes to keep track of all the different values that are on there. Now, here's the way it works, all right? Okay, I'm going to reset the network, which will give it a bunch of random values. And then this, for those who don't know Maximus-C Uzi, means it's going to fire 10,000 bangs, okay? And in each one, it's going to go, this T means it's going to do this one, then that one, then this one, and then that one. So it's going to send it this 000111. I'm going to say that's a high value. So I'm going to train that one to say 1. Then it's going to give it 111000. I'm going to say that's a low value. I'm going to train it to put out -1. Okay? So basically, when I hit this, it's going to do this thing where it's going to go through and compute 10,000 of those values, trying to get 1 to come out when it looks like that, trying to get -1 to come out when it looks like that. Okay? So here we go. I'm going to train the net. Well, let me actually do this. Reset the neural net. Train the net. It's learning. Okay, now let's see if it worked. Okay, let's send it some example things here. I'm going to send it this, and if I say calculate, it'll calculate the net. Oh, look, that was in fact a low value, and it put out a -1. So let's try this one. Then I can say calculate. Look, that was in fact a high value, and it put out a 1. Now here's one that's a little bit messy. Let's calculate that. Oh, it's close to 0 because there wasn't much there. But you can actually go on and edit this, okay? And I'm going to say, what if I give it something like that, okay? What's it going to do? I'll say calculate. Well, it's going to say -0.2, so that means it thinks it's kind of low, but not really low, okay? Let's do the opposite. Let's go up here and do that. What's that going to do? I'll calculate it. Oh, it thinks that's a pretty high sound. It's close to 1. It's 0.8, okay? Or I could do something really goofy like this and fake the poor thing out, and it's not going to know what to do. Calculate. Oh, it thinks it's a high sound, probably because of those components there, okay? But essentially, you know, I've created this thing that can disambiguate between stuff that has stuff down here versus stuff up here. And notice that once I get it trained, it happens very fast because this is just a series of like 16, 32, whatever, multiplies and adds. Computers are really fast at doing that, okay? So it actually kind of works. And what's bizarre is if I print this out, these are all the node weights and values that it has assigned, and they're just almost random. You know, this is where they say you don't really know what's going on with the neural net. This is it. Because you can't really say from a given set of weights that it's assigned. If I ran this again, it would be different maybe, you know? So it's really, really kind of bizarre that way. All right? So, let's see. Right. The thing that was missing that all of a sudden now means that neural nets have completely taken over. There's not hardly any symbolic computing research being done anymore, you know, again, these battles, is what happened was access to huge amounts of data to train the thing and huge, massive multi-processor machines to run the training sets. Google, Amazon, places like that. They can actually, because in order to really get the network to work properly, I had to do 10,000 of these just for this simple example. You're going to have to do like many, many millions of calculations to really get something that's going to do something like ChatGPT or something like that. And basically, it's the same principle, though. It's just kind of adjusting its weird network and saying, well, when this word is here, I should use that word. That's how those Google predictive algorithms work. When you're typing, all of a sudden, it knows what you meant to write next. Ooh. Or do you guys use the mailing things where it gives you suggested responses? Yeah. A lot of time, my mom sends me like I hope she doesn't see this. Mom, I love you. Okay. She sends me like 40 or 50, well, maybe not that many, and a lot of times I'll just hit, that's really great. Just send it off. Oh, golly. Yeah, don't watch this. I'll have to edit that out or something. Okay, but I'm going to show you some of the results of the Google work, okay? And this is an earlier version. This is, they came out with a version, they put all their research online for free, which is really fun. This has kind of been one of the ethos of the neural net community, probably because they were like hidden and underground for a while. This is using a thing called TensorFlow tied to a package they call Magenta. Magenta is specific for doing music work. TensorFlow is their general way of kind of designing networks and doing kind of neural net machine learning things. And this is an example. I'm going to play you this one. I won't play you that one because I want to play you one other thing. And we're getting a little close to the end. We're going to make it, though. This is basically, they asked their network model that had been trained on Debussy's music, to basically, when I say trained, just doing exactly what I did there, playing, saying, make me some Debussy-like stuff. And it would do it, and it would, not Debussy enough, and it would like kind of learn all these things. And basically, you'll hear the beginning of Clair de Lune, and then it's going to start improvising afterwards, okay? It's pretty amazing. I'll stop it there. But yeah, there's a bunch of examples. Of course, they're going to put their best examples online, to show what it can do. But you can imagine walking into the atrium of Trump Tower and hearing some piano player playing this. It's not bad. But the thing that really freaked me out is they actually got their neural net to not just, that was using MIDI. So the piano sounds that you heard were basically being generated by a software synth piano. They actually got a neural network that will generate the sound directly. And I am just flabbergasted by this because bear in mind, they're generating upwards of 44,100 samples per second. You have to have massive computer to even generate that in real time, and to imagine hooking that to a neural net where you're going to predict every sample, okay? And they made this thing called tone transfer, which allows you to combine models of different instruments. And yeah, the thing is about 4 minutes long. Now this is made for a very commercial audience, so it's a little goofy. It's not quite as goofy as seeing 30-year-old Brad going, yes, we can take this and do all kinds of things. But you'll get the idea, okay? Okay. Where was it? It was supposed to like play. Wait a minute. Hold on, guys. Shoot. Tone transfer. Okay. Watch the short video. I hit the let's play. I want to watch the short video. Okay. Right.
Oh, wow.
Sounds like something in the jungle.
It sounds like a dinosaur. Tone transfer is a technology developed by the Magenta team in Google AI. It allows you to deconstruct sound into Play-Doh and enables you to mold it into something else. So if you took the sound of birds chirping, or if the sound of you singing, ooh, ooh, it can remold that input into the sound of the violin. We do this by training a machine learning model to distill what makes an instrument sound like that particular instrument.
Whatever would that sound like? That's beautiful. The way it picks up pitch is insane, right?
It enables a whole new class of AI-powered audio synthesis that was never possible before.
I think the thing that stands out the most to me is all of the nuances of the sound that make it so much more real than working with a sample. Oh my god! Whoa! It gives you a lot of surprises. I put this through. So that sounds like this. So cool. I like that little squeal that it added in, but I guess it took a breath of mine and turned it into like a...
Recently, I became interested in using actual organic instruments, and that's helps me a lot in the songwriting area of it. All right, let's see what this sounds like. That's really cool. I'm excited by not knowing what could come out of it. That was really cute.
Let's see what that sounds like. I love the breath on that. I think the unique sounds that you can get out of this with just, you know, the things you have already in your studio, it just opens up a whole other realm. So let's import that craziness and see what happens. I'm definitely going to use that in the next project I do.
When I record the sounds, they all start with vocals. And then, yeah, just the fact that I could literally just sit down and like vocalize the exact thing and then it comes out so great, that is iconic.
How are you going to excite the model to do something weird? You can sing into it and you bang on some pots and you have a cat meow in the background. That's a lot of inspiration for the model to work with. And I feel like that's where the magic of tone transfer happens.
Okay. So, yeah.
I think I have played with this before.
Have you?
Bookmark, it's using DDSP.
Yeah.
So I actually have that.
Do you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's see what this is.
Yeah, Seth said that you'd done a fair amount of this stuff.
This is like a singing voice.
Yeah.
This
right.
is like the source. We're trying to transfer it into like, I don't remember it's violin or saxophone. Exactly.
That's great. Yeah, I like what he said, that little squeal. When it sees noise, it just doesn't know how to pitch track it, so it's... I think I would do it, just go shh, see what it came up with. Anyhow, yeah, so that's it. Yeah, next time, I want you to go out and see if you can find some examples. There's a lot of stuff that I've got to show you that I haven't shown you, like LLM, I think is the name of one of them, you know, and there's some others that do some pretty crazy stuff. But find some examples of using AI to make music, and we'll bring them in and take a look at them, kind of survey the field a little bit. Because the field is constantly changing right now, so I can't sit down and just like teach you, oh, here's how you do music AI. But we are going to have a special guest. Remember I told you that I figured out how to like get the Chat GPT to generate music for me? And I could say, you know, make a 4-bar thing and, you know, do something like that. Well, I talked to the guy that made the videos that I learned from, and he's going to come and actually present his work. He's really terrific. So he's going to be here in a couple of weeks. Well, actually get a special guest in a couple of weeks, but he'll be here after that and show us kind of what he's learned, because he's really gone deep into this. So it'll be kind of cool. He's going to come on Zoom. He lives in Portland. So anyhow, that's that. Any questions or anything about this before we quit things off? Okay. I turn this off here, right? No. Okay, Doug had to run. I have to figure out how to turn off the, here we go. Stop recording.